Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Infrastructure Network. My name is Chad Smeltzer. I am your host. Today's guest is David Wilshaw, who is looks like you're a professional geologist.
That's correct. Yes. Yeah.
Please give me a little bit of background on your career because it's amazing. I'm looking at the sheet here that you gave me, and there's all kinds of cool stuff we want to talk about. But give us a little bit of your background, David.
Sure. Yeah. So originally, I'm from the UK. You might tell there's a slight accent. It's not central Florida so much, but maybe northern England. But yeah, I was son of a coal miner. I grew up in a mining town in sort of North Midlands called Stoke-on-Trent in the UK. I got to know my dad's been a coal miner. He knew the chief scientist at the coal board kind of regional office there. So my dad used to bring home cool fossils and stuff like that from the guys that dug out of the core holes they've been drilling for new coal mining resources. And ended up doing it sort of junior and senior level at high school. I did geology, and I was good at it. It was one of those things I was good at. So I went on to university and studied geology at bachelor's level at the University of London, and I graduated with my geology degree in 1984. So it's almost it's getting on there. It's 39 years ago this year. So yeah, so came out of college with my geology degree and did what everybody else did at the time in the 80s. I went into the oil business, because we had the North Sea oil boom going on. So I was. First time I ever flew, because I'd never flown before. Until I graduated college, I flew in a helicopter going out to the Beryl Alpha platform in the North Sea where we were doing production wells. So I was
that'd be cool.
Yeah, I was a mudlogging geologist. It's not a very exciting job, but I was just grabbing samples of soil or rock as they drilled through it and seeing what it was, But I did have a couple of years, ended up working in Norway for a year and a half, out of Stavanger and Bergen in Norway and the northern North Sea up in the Arctic Circle. So that was pretty cool job for straight out of college. And then I was victim of the oil price going from $40 a barrel to $20 a barrel in 1986. So we all got laid off. So so I kind of retrained. I went and did a master's degree in foundation engineering, which is a geotechnical engineering degree. That was my master's. I did that in University of Birmingham, again, the UK one, not the one in Alabama. So,
got it.
So I'm you can tell again. You can tell by the accent.
Right.
So that kind of started my journey in my academic qualification. Started my journey in the geotechnical engineering and what's called engineering geology field. So engineering geologists are geologists, but they work within civil engineering and mining to some extent, but mainly in civil engineering. So I started working for big consultancy firms out in the UK and did some pretty cool stuff. Things like they worked on the Channel Tunnel, things like that, some pretty big jobs, a couple of nuclear power plants in the UK I worked on. So did some pretty cool stuff over the years, spent almost 20 years working in the UK as an engineering geologist. And but I got married and had kids, but the girl I married, she's a nurse and she'd worked in Boston, she'd worked in Vancouver, she loved North America. So she's British. Gail is my wife. She's a British girl too, but she did have that Boston feel and that Massachusetts nursing license. So we saw a job in California for advertising for RNs, and they're giving green cards for everybody. So in California, so we took a trip out to California in 2003, so 20 years ago this year. And I started working in the US. So I worked in California for a year, and then we kind of moved over to Florida for just a more affordable lifestyle, really, because California was really expensive at the time. So, and probably still is, I'm sure. But we moved to Orlando area in Florida in 2004, and we've been here ever since. So and again, practicing as a geologist here in Florida. So it's kind of some quite a few differences in my career from the UK stuff, and did some work in Germany and Ireland and places like that, Cyprus, and but then coming over here and California is very different geology, as you can imagine, different risks there. But Florida's got its own little set of peculiarities, shall we say? So.
Well, you're
So,
in, you're in sinkhole country, basically. All I ever see sometimes coming out of Florida, is sinkholes for when it comes to
yeah,
infrastructure. So
yeah.
you're in a good
So
place.
yeah, it really is. I mean, in my sort of kind of niche of geology. I mean, geology is a very broad church. There's lots of geologists do things like looking for dinosaur bones and looking for oil and gas. But I'm in construction. I'm in civil engineering. So
Yeah.
for me as an engineering geologist, that's my main gig, is really, what is going to collapse under the ground, what is going to cause problems to either, the built environment on the ground or the infrastructure in the ground.
Yeah.
And it's a very, it is this, where I am, particularly in Central Florida, is the kind of the sinkhole capital of the world, really. We have a very peculiar set of geologic circumstances here. We have rock, which is really porous and has a lot of cavities in there. And the rock's pretty shallow through much of the state. Most of the time, you're going to find limestone in certain parts of the state, 30, 40 feet down. You're in that rock, and that rock's got holes in it. Other parts of the state, the limestone's deeper. It could be 100 feet down. But all that means is if you've got a big hole in the limestone 100 feet down, then you're going to get a really big sinkhole at the surface. So it translates to just bigger holes in the ground. But I found a lot of the impact on particularly on infrastructure, either in or on the ground, is those shallow rock conditions where you can get problems that can damage, let's say, pipes and sewers, but also highways and bridges and railroads, anything that's built on the ground. If you're not, if you're built on material that's going to move or collapse completely, then you've got a problem. So
that's what I was going to ask you, like the challenges in geology. Why like let's say a city would maybe hire a geologist to kind of look at their community's infrastructure. What are some of the challenges you see out there?
Yeah, I mean, it depends where you are, really. I mean, I say I've worked in various places, as you know, and I'm licensed in California and licensed in Pennsylvania and Tennessee and places like that. Most of my work's in Florida, but the challenges always tend to be fairly similar. People want to develop land in the sort of most economic way. They don't want to spend money underground. People like their buildings to look nice on the outside, and there's an old rule that there's no glory in foundations. Nobody wants to spend millions of dollars in protecting infrastructure or buildings from problems underground. So so everybody wants the most affordable ground, which has usually not been built on before, and there's probably a reason for that. So you're looking, as a geologist, I'm looking for any kind of subsidence, and that can come from natural soils that are just not very good. We've got organic soils and peats here in Florida, for example. Parts of Texas, you've got collapsible soils that can cause problems. You go out west, you've got seismic issues. You've got soil which can liquefy and move during seismic events. So you've got all those types of problems which fall into the geologist's kind of wheelhouse, if you like. And you've also got the sort of change in circumstances. So in Florida, for example, we use our limestone bedrock as an aquifer. We pump our water out of it to drink. We pump it out to irrigate crops. Occasionally we get cold weather here, and we pump water out of the ground and spray it on our strawberries, so the strawberries get protected from the frost. Bizarrely, the water freezes first and the strawberries don't. So if you've got sort of conditions that we create that change the balance of nature, then you can often cause problems. So again, one of our problems, that example of the pumping water out to spray on the strawberry crops, that led to like 100 different sinkholes in the strawberry fields of Hillsborough County, Florida. So because we just sucked too much water out, we imbalanced things, and the ground just collapsed as a consequence. So we're in that sort of that zone where we try and predict what might happen if we develop infrastructure and or built environments in an area. So if we're looking in the villages of Florida here, the big retirement communities, or pasture land, you wouldn't know there's anything wrong with that land. It's beautiful, clean grassland. It's just grazing cattle, and it looks gorgeous. Now, if you put subdivisions in there, you got to collect your stormwater off all the roads and the roofs of the houses and all the hardscape that you're going to put in. You've got to collect that water and put it into some kind of stormwater storage. So they build big dry detention ponds or retention ponds where the stormwater goes to. And we get rid of the pollution abatement volume, so we don't contaminate waterways and the rest of it. We try and filter the water through before it gets back into the aquifer and causes a pollution event. So it's all good stuff. Wow. Problem is, if you have an area which has just been pasture land, and all of a sudden you build a man-made lake effectively there, you divert all your stormwater into a pond, and it creates a temporary lake most of the time, but still a lake.
Yeah.
Then that imbalances things again. It's the same as pumping water out. Well, adding water into the ground can imbalance things, and then you get sinkholes that open up in retention ponds. So it's having that what could happen kind of view. That's what we're good at. We try and plan things. So listen, if you're going to put your stormwater in this area, this is a really sinkhole prone area. So if you go some other part of the development, the geology is different. We've done our borings, we've taken soil samples, we understand the way that soil's distributed on your site. So that a better place to put it might be in this area. So that's the kind of what we get involved with in any kind of built development. Really, we try and look at the what ifs.
So do you get hired by the engineering firms, civil engineering firms, to come in and take studies before they start the development?
Yeah, we're pretty early doors. We're pretty in there. One of the first things really, it's even at due diligence before anybody's even bought the land. Some geologists get involved in more on the environmental side in terms of pollution and things of that nature. Previous land uses. So you do phase 1 environmental assessments, phase 2 assessments if there's potential contamination. So that's something that geologists are involved with. It's not really something I do sometimes, but it's not my main. It doesn't keep me busy most of the time.
The only reason why I asked that is because if you look at Chicago, right by the lake and stuff like that, that is built for 50, 100, hundreds of years at this point, right?
Right.
Or at least 100 years, back in 1860 something. But when they were building the foundation of that city, and they were the lake issues, and they had to raise the ground and all this. And I've always thought to myself, what is going on underneath some of these cities? Like, have they looked at the footing of these structures?
Yeah, so that's very, very true. Yeah, so I think when you're working in the urban environment where there's already development, and I've given a few examples of raw land that gets developed, but when you're putting infill development in urban areas, often you're trying to build something which is bigger and taller than previously, right. and what you can build can have an impact on on the surrounding buildings and infrastructure. And a good example is London. London, huge city, developed over thousands of years. It's a Roman city. But that's got stuff going underground as much as it has above ground. They got the whole underground rail network, the tube system, the underground, and you've got lots of Victorian era drainage and things of that nature. And I'm sure you've probably got that in cities like Chicago, where you've got people have created excavations under the ground to put infrastructure in there. The soil itself, you can normally design for the soil or rock to be able to hold the building up with a good factor of safety. But it's the techniques that you need to use in urban environments are different. You can't go driving big steel ball or concrete piles in the middle of a block where you've got buildings all around it, because it's you could do something to the soil which might be detrimental. In some conditions, if the soil is very weak, you can actually create sinkholes by pile driving. So you can cause the ground to collapse just by the vibration of repetitive, particularly hard driving of piles. That can cause the ground to collapse. It can also cause infrastructure to collapse. So it's there's again, Chicago is obviously a different challenge, and other big cities, of course. Any other big cities have that same challenge.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Obviously, when they're going to design or build structural engineers get involved, and then I was always thinking about the foundation of how much of that goes into the planning and specifications. I would assume a lot, because
it is. Again, it's very early, and it's not really a glory job. We're sort of beavering away in the background early on in the design. So we'll typically tell the structural engineer whether a shallow foundation might work for a building, or it's going to be something more substantial. There's ways of improving the ground. You can improve it by vibratory techniques. You can pump materials into the ground and stabilize it. You can pump concrete grout and chemical grouts in the ground and stabilize the ground. There's lots of different ways that you can make the ground stiff enough to be able to support the building. But everybody needs to know that fairly early on, because it has a cost. If you can put it on shallow foundations, fantastic. They can put all the money into the superstructure and all those lovely, glass buildings with nice steel frames and all the nice reception area. But if you're going to dump a couple of $1 million underground building piles and just to support the building, well, the budget's going to be different. You might have to look at the viability sometimes of the whole project. So.
Right. No, all that makes a ton of sense. And, you're talking about different ways of making the ground basically work and build that foundation underground with different materials and things like that. When you have existing infrastructure and it is, the ground's unstable or becomes unstable due to these different factors like vibration and things you kind of mentioned, what does kind of business owner or building owners really have to do? Like what are some of the things they have to, what are some of their challenges, I guess, would be the question that they could do.
Yeah, I think a lot of I get involved in a lot of holes in the ground. That's my thing. So I often, particularly, after there's been hurricanes in Florida, we get, things suddenly you'll get sinkholes occurring, and often that's due to old infrastructure. And obviously the property owner sees what his building's like, his or her building's like. He or she will see the condition of the roof, the condition of the walls, and you can tell whether your building's aging or it needs some maintenance. But the stuff underground really is sight unseen, isn't it? It's not you don't really. It's not normal for somebody to, better go and check out my sewers, make sure they're all in good shape, So they tend to be forgotten about because out of sight, out of mind, and so I think as a property owner or a business owner, that's something you don't really want to go wrong either, because it's going to obviously impact your building and how it's going to, function. But also if you've got infrastructure which is aging and decaying and then it collapses, then you've got a big problem, because it can have a huge impact on your building itself. You could lose foundation support to the building if a sewer or a drain collapses close to where the foundations are bearing. You lose all that soil support. You could lose part of your parking lot. I've seen a lot of after Hurricane Ian we had here last year, terrible hurricane, but we didn't get the catastrophic damage that they had on the coast here in Central Florida, but certainly we had a lot of drain collapses because of the huge volume of rainfall that we put up with. It was a massive rain event. I think the water levels are now kind of dropping back to normal after a hurricane that was end of last September. It just dumped a ton of rain here. So a lot of the you put high velocity, high volume flow through a lot of, storm drainage systems. You can get washouts and just leaks around the joints and the pipes. And once you start washing soil away down a pipe, it goes off somewhere. You don't know where it's gone. It goes off and ends up somewhere else. But it's gone from your property, and all of a sudden, instead of having soil under there, you've got a hole. And that hole just works its way up to the surface until it finds something. It becomes stable, and it can become stable often when the ground collapses in, and then it stops moving. So curious question: the Surfside, Florida situation that happened. Now that, from what I understand, was corrosion. Does anybody understand what happened there? Yeah,
was that a ground issue?
It was multiple issues there. I don't want to say too much, because I actually did some work there on behalf of the
did you? Okay.
the receiver. So I did some geophysical testing down there, but it's a relatively old building on the coast. There was I think there was problems with the superstructure. There was problems that occurred before it collapsed, and there was a lot of new construction around it. So I know the case did settle, and but there was a lot going on that there's not one smoking gun I would imagine for that whole thing.
Got it.
But that was building on next to the ocean is it's a very corrosive environment. You know, there's
Yeah.
again, the sea level rise is a thing. You know, and whether you hold the view that it's, you know, it's just natural. I mean, as a geologist, I know that sea levels are going to rise anyway, because we're in an interglacial period in between two ice ages. So I expect it to happen. So I don't have really strong views either way, because nobody was here during the last time the ice ages ended. But, you know, it is rising. And you know, I think you could take the view that it's getting a bit faster because of burning fossil fuels. But at the end of the day, it's happening anyway. So coastal development has a lot of, you know, resiliency issues that they need to deal with, and because sea level is going to rise, come what may, you know, because it's we're in between two ice ages. You know, now it's happening. If it's happening too fast for us, then we need to take account of that. But again, building on a coastal environment where sea level is rising is going to be problematic.
Risky.
Yeah, it's risky. Yeah,
really risky nowadays. You never know what you're going to get into, and especially when it comes to the soil and underneath, you can't see anything. So.
Exactly.
You're kind of rolling the dice on some of this stuff, and that's where they hire someone like you to do the analysis on the ground and give you, you know, an idea of what that structure should look like.
I mean, both, you know, obviously I do a lot of work on new construction and try and prevent problems, but I also get on the back end, like Surfside, for the forensic side, to try and, you know, find out what went wrong. And that's what a lot of the failed infrastructure work I do is, you know, trying to find out, you know, what caused it to fail, how do we fix it? You know, what do we do? And, you know, there's always a way of fixing things. You know, we're very resourceful as you know, as humans. We can normally find a way, and engineers are the most resourceful of all, aren't they? So geologists come up with problems and big long words and fancy theories, but the engineers have to come up with the design to try and fix these things. So
100%. Yeah, no, it's so what I'm trying to understand a little bit more is, you know, with all the potholes, sinkholes, things like that in infrastructure here, even in the Midwest where I'm at, you know, there's that, like you've talked about, the underwashing, you know, the roads will cave in because, you know, heavy rain events, storms and stuff like that. And we're getting more of this climate change now. So we're going to see more of this weather impacting our communities potentially, and then more potholes or sinkholes that are going to develop. If a building or let's say an infrastructure, I wouldn't use a bridge because that's not on the ground, but, you know, let's say a highway structure of some sort, and it starts having a collapse issue, maybe an erosion issue, or a building has a big sinkhole, are there solutions? Like, what do they look like?
Yeah, so I mean, it's you know, all of those problems you just described are where you just lose soil. The soil has disappeared from where it's supposed to be, and it's supposed to be either supporting the foundation or it's supposed to be surrounding the, you know, the sewer pipe. Or so once that soil is gone, then as if you know, you get a hole opening at the surface, as you kind of fill it in with some soil. You know, and that's you know, that's the emergency response for most sinkholes in Florida. You know, you got to stop it getting any bigger, really. So you'll basically stop that surface expression, because often sinkholes are fairly sort of straight-sided, and then they come out like a, you know, almost like a martini glass. You know, you get this losing of the size keep falling in and get bigger and bigger. So if you can fill it in as soon as you can, that's great. Yeah. So that's what the you know, if you see you know, something happens in a highway, you'll see just, you know, dump trucks, you know, just to fill it in. But all that does, it replaces that soil volume, and it holds the sides up, and it stops it getting any bigger. That's a real band-aid. You know, it's not a permanent fix. So you've got to find out where the root of the problem is. And the root is either a geologic hole in the ground, and say a hole in the limestone, or, you know, a pipe in a volcanic area where you've got a volcanic pipe which is open, something like that. So there's, you know, different types of holes you can get geologically, or if it's a washout failure from a pipe or a sewer failure, then you've got to find out where the sewer is leaking and you know, stop that from happening any further. So then you need to get in there and replace the void space, and you can't really do that from the surface. You can't just, you know, haul up with a dump truck and fill in the hole that you can't see, it's buried. So typically you'll do some exploration, you'll drill down. You know, it's not always the case that the hole underneath the sinkhole at the surface are directly above, you know, one's above the other. Often the sinkhole, you know, the hole itself can be some way off, and something's diverted the flow of soil away to one side. So we often see that if you've got
I didn't think about that.
So if you've got a harder layer, or And sometimes even, the weight of the building holding down on the ground makes that ground a bit stiffer. So the sinkhole kind of can't get through that stiffer soil and it comes out to the side. So you have to do some exploration, which is what we do. We have drill rigs and we take samples and find we have geophysical techniques. We can find stiffer soils or less stiff soils. We got ground penetrating radar. So we got all the gadgets that we can try and find out where the hole is.
Yeah.
And then when you found the hole, you got to get something in there to fill it up. So traditionally, and I've done this over the 30 odd years of my career, really, is just to fill it in with concrete. That's been the old tried and tested. And this goes back to when I was working in the UK.
Yeah.
Like coal mining area. We'd have mine shafts and we'd have coal workings. Back hundreds of years old. Not recorded on any maps, but you've got somewhere where they sent a 12-year-old child in there with a pick and a shovel to dig the coal out. There'll be these little seams of voids in the ground. So you'd go in and you'd fill it with concrete, and it can be a mixture of just pure grout, a weak concrete, or you can mix additives in it like fly ash from the power plants we used to use in the UK, just to make it cheaper to do.
Like
so it's a bulk
type of material.
Yeah. Well, you could bulk, anything to bulk fill it. Now the thing is, when you're trying to pump concrete in the ground, it doesn't like being pumped really. You have to have it fairly loose to be able to get it to go any distance. But you can use it to compact the soil. If you put a lot of pressure on it. Again, concrete doesn't really like to be pumped that much.
I was going to say,
if you ever handle concrete, it's a pretty.
It could set. It could it's be mixed incorrectly. Exactly, there's so many variables. Yeah.
Or you can get diluted by groundwater and it doesn't.
There you go.
Often, and there's lots of things that can go wrong. But if you put a bunch of concrete trucks behind a pump and keep pumping it, eventually you'll fill the hole and you won't be able to get any more concrete in there, and that's usually the job done. And that's been traditionally the way of doing sinkholes and mine shafts and coal mine areas. It's all those, it's fill it full of concrete.
Wow.
More recently there's different technologies coming to fore, which is good. There's innovation. So there's polymers have been used a lot more recently. I mean, they've been used for a while in the shallow sort of arena. So in the top 15 feet below the surface, you can use polymers. Again, polymers have a kind of a set time, so you have to be careful that you can get them in the right place so before they set off. And if they get, once they have their reaction and either harden, or the two polymer types, which are like an expanding foam, if you mix two polymers together and they start to react and then they foam up, if that happens too soon, then you don't get to the root of the problem. So that's it's okay for shallow stuff. If you've got shallow pipes that have leaked and things of that nature, they work pretty well. If it's deeper down, it becomes a problem because you've got to pump them, say 100 feet below the ground. They'll set off, but by the time they get to 20 feet, they block the pipe. So they're not going to work. Although there's new innovation coming in. I've been working on a couple of jobs with a company here in Florida called Deep Horizons Injection Grouting. They've been doing. They've patented a technique where you actually mix the polymers at the end of the injection pipe, so in the ground. So theoretically you could put the if you can drill 100 feet and get their actual piece of equipment is in the drill bit, you do the mixing down there at 100 feet. So that's really good. I mean, I used that on a lift station where we had a 30-foot deep void. Again, conventional compaction grout. It was a kind of a blunt instrument, really. It wouldn't have, it could have caused more damage than it probably would have caused damage to the lift station. We might have lost the lift station. So to put the pressure in the ground, we'd need to fix it. So, but this doesn't apply that kind of pressure. It expands and it fills the void and it compacts the soil, but it didn't damage the lift station. So that was a great technique, and it sealed the cracks in the lift station and the sewer that was coming into it as well. So that's a great application of a brand new technology, which is hopefully that gets used more often, because that's got many applications, I think, where filling a void with concrete isn't going to really be the right solution or the most effective solution. So
and so let me kind of go back on everything you were telling me, because it's all really new to me and I'm learning. So it's kind of like my house, right? My house, if my roof is leaking, I got to track where that source is coming from.
Exactly.
Similar to underground, right? If you have a collapse or a sinkhole of some sort, you want to figure out where the main source of that is coming from. Like, where is it going?
Exactly.
Where's the soil traveling to, and where's that big void?
Yeah.
So then you have solutions which are using concrete to fill it. You know, if I was using the same analogy of like my roof, I would want to patch it with something, right? Seal it up.
Yeah. Yeah.
The one solution for in the ground is using concrete. The other one is compact grout, did you say, or compact?
Yeah, so concrete, that's a different type of compaction grouting is what I was
Okay.
referring to. So that's so often, particularly again with the sinkholes in particular, you've got the hole in the ground that the soil has moved into, but the action of movement has weakened everything around it. So I'm trying to think of a good analogy, but if you're sort of digging a hole on the beach and the tide's going out, and you can dig a hole and it's okay, but then the sides start to fall away and loosen. So
Right.
that kind of happens underground when you've got a sinkhole. So you have to try and make the ground strong again, because otherwise you could fill the hole and it won't get any worse, but you still got this weak zone of soil that you're still going to have long-term problems with. The ground's going to settle still, you're going to get cracks, you're going to get damage to your infrastructure. So the idea of compaction grouting is to compact the soil so that it's strong again. And again, with concrete grout, which is what's traditionally used, you can't really, you've got to do that under high pressure. So if you've got a structure that's delicate, or there's underground infrastructure, you can't really put that much pressure into the ground without damaging something. So it's a balance between making the ground strong again, and this is ground which has been there in some cases for millions of years. You're trying to return its strength without blowing everything up at the same time. So with compaction grout, say for a house, you're going to lift if you start pumping compaction grout any shallower than say 10 to 15 feet, you might lift the house off its foundation. So that you'll see, when we do this kind of work, we're there with a level on the foundation, and we're pumping, and then the house starts to rise, we cut the pumps off. Whoa, stop. Right. So it's a bit of a blunt instrument, really.
I bet.
But it's effective, but it's kind of crude sometimes. So
no. And I'm just trying to just so I can understand a little bit more. So it's you got the compact grout as a solution. Concrete doesn't make any sense because obviously they've been using it for a long time, but it sounds really expensive. It sounds super time consuming, and you're not going to be able to maybe reach the source you're trying to look for, the way it sounds. Where you mentioned this new type of technology, the injection grout at the source, which makes a whole bunch more sense, because if you can find the void that you're talking about, and I'm going to ask you how you do that, but if you can find that main source of the problem, and let's say it's like you said, 100 feet down, or I don't know if you can even go deeper than that, but could you get to the point, inject the grout? Would it fill up coming up to the surface? Is that also another way to look at it too? A travel?
Yeah. So both techniques you could do that. So you start off with trying to fill the void up, and then you pull the pipe out of the ground and keep injecting, and it slowly compacts the soil. With the polymer grout technique that I was talking about, that allows you to make sure you fill it. Because it flows more easily than concrete. So you make sure you fill all the voids and the cracks and everything else. And then you do the same thing. You start to bring it out of the ground and add more polymer, and the polymer expands and compacts the soil as you're coming up. So it does the same thing, but it doesn't rely upon a great big pump at the surface with very high PSI pressures in a line pumping concrete from a hopper into the ground. We're doing it. It's done with chemicals. So you have two chemicals which you pump into the ground. There's a patented device that this company has, DHIG, the Polymer Technologies, the company. They've got this patented device which allows the two polymers to mix at the point where you're injecting them. Okay. So you fill the void, and then you move up, and then you do another separate injection, brand new injection, and the polymers mix there, and then they expand and consolidate and compact the soil. So it does the same thing, but it's just more efficient.
Right. Sounds like
it's obviously it's more cost effective. I imagine. I haven't done a side by side costing of it, but I imagine compared to having a bunch of concrete trucks, turning away there, waiting to get pumped into the ground.
That sounds expensive with the pays per hour, sitting there with all the material.
Yeah, and then if it's there too long, you got to send it back to the batch plants.
That sounds like a lot. Yeah,
I mean, I've done a lot of repairing sinkholes under just a regular 1,800 square foot house here in Florida. You're typically looking at $100,000 in the materials just to grout the to fill the void in the limestone and stabilize the soil. So just for one house, I mean, imagine that if you had that bill. I mean, you talked about fixing your roof. You got $100,000 bill for fixing the ground under your house just to stop it from collapsing. So but that's just a concrete grout. Yeah, that's the concrete grout analogy. Yeah.
So there's really only a couple of solutions. There's not many: concrete or compact grout or injection grout. It sounds like that are available to stabilize the soil, so to speak.
Yeah. So there's concrete, cementitious grout, concrete grout, and then the chemical grout. These polymer
okay,
grouts.
so it's
they're the two main. Yeah, it's polymer and concrete. Yeah.
Okay.
Or
cement. Then got it. And then it's so if you had all three lined up. Now I have a question of my. I'll go back to all three. But my question is, how do you find and I guess probe to find these places where you use the injection grout and that like 100 feet down, there's the void, and then maybe 50 feet up or another 100 feet up, whatever that looks like, 50 feet up, you got to fill it back up. How do you know where to place the injection, I guess?
Yeah. So that's the skill of the geologist, really. So somebody described a geologist to me once as being somebody who could describe an elephant just by feeling its trunk. So so we take a small number of boreholes and samples of the soil. We use geophysics. We'll scan the ground with either seismic techniques or we use radar. We use electrical conductivity. So we try and model what the ground looks like. So we'll try and pick out where the main void is, and then where the loose zones in the soil are that have been caused by the movement of the soil. Yeah. So then we get with the sort of the engineer that's going to do the repair or the contractor that's going to do the repair and say, listen, this is the main void, but you've also got weakening all around. And then typically you do a grid. So you do you focus on the main problem area and then move outwards in a grid pattern and try and find the weakened zones and make the whole of the either the building footprint or the roadway or the line of the sewer that's been damaged. You try and make that whole again by these injection techniques underground. Okay. Yeah. So we do have to map it out. We do have to we don't just rock up there and start pumping stuff in the ground. We have a bit of a plan, because we need to, really, because the other thing we need to do is estimate, well, how big is this bloody hole? Is it right? How many truckloads of concrete are going to have to pump into this thing, to make it safe again? So that's again, we do a lot with a small amount of data, but we have to be somewhat conservative. So sometimes the estimates are over what goes in the ground, which is great, but sometimes they're not. Sometimes we're pumping for a long time, and it can get the concrete grout is done on a cubic yard basis, and the more goes in the ground, the happier the contractor is usually,
So. I mean, they have this problem now where they pump the grout from internally inside the infrastructure out of the structure, right? Through in same kind of like an injection grout type process. And then they could end up pumping tons of grout to fill voids around the sewer pipe or around where the lateral connection is to the sewer main. They start filling that up, and they'll just pump, and there's a huge void there. So
that's a challenge, really. I mean, it's getting the stuff where you need it, not where it's. I mean, right. If you put enough pressure behind, particularly compaction grout, you can push it at quite a distance. So I've done sinkhole jobs here in Florida where we've grouted the house next door inadvertently, because it's just found a cavity and it's let's go this way. You don't really know where it's going. I think that's the problem. All you're doing, if you have a pump at the surface and you're pumping into a pipe that's in the ground, and where it goes, no one shall know. Which is why I like this. When we did that lift station using the Deep Horizons injection grouting technique, that we knew where it was going. Because we inject it, we put it in a place, we injected it there, and it expands out and finds its way. But I did testing on behalf of the county whose project it was. We, I did geophysics and drilling around the lift station. I didn't find any of it outside of where it's supposed to have been, which I thought was great. It would have been, it'd been a shame to see all that, taxpayer dollar going down.
Waste,
Filling a hole about half a mile away, or something. Yeah. So it's if you can inject it and do the treatment in situ, it's better than trying to guess what's going on from the surface, I think.
Yeah, there's no doubt that what it sounds like Deep Horizon has, Polymer Technologies USA, they have this injection grout. It makes total sense compared to just putting concrete down the void, so to speak, and trying to fix it that way. Yeah, cost effective. It sounds very
and I think it's probably safer as well, because I think when you're dealing with high pressure concrete, and we're pumping, you have to put a lot of pressure on a pump to pump concrete into the ground. It doesn't really want to go there. It's a thick and viscous medium to be dealing with.
Right.
So I've done work on sort of leaking dams and things like that, trying to replace the core of a dam. And that's always a bit scary, because you've got are you going to blow it out? Are you going to put so much pressure on the ground that you're going to cause a bigger problem than you've already got? So I think a lighter touch sometimes is better for make everybody feel a lot more comfortable. If we're injecting here, and this is what we're doing, we know precisely where we're at, and it just takes some of that kind of the hope out of it, the hope it doesn't fail kind of thing.
Well, this sounds like a safer alternative to, using the injection route and finding the source and then injecting there. Kind of like one of those spray foam commercials I see all the time now, the fix it stuff, they're like, and it just like swells up. And
not dissimilar.
Right. But, that's kind of the way you think about these injection grouts, how they expand chemically. Now, a lot of people, we only get a little bit of time left, but let's talk about the chemical and the environmental impacts, because I'm sure I'll have a lot of people asking me about that. Can you elaborate on that?
Yeah, I mean the chemicals that are used, they're inert. I mean, when they have their reaction and then they are inert. They've been used for years. These polymers are not new. So I think it's and they're used underground, so they're used in the groundwater. So there's no it creates an inert material. I mean, I'm not a chemist, so I can't really say what the formula are to all these things. But I said they've been used for a long time in shallow applications. There's obviously the new technology coming forward allows you to use them at any depth, really. But they are very commonly used in foundation repairs, lifting slabs, and shallow foundation improvement. So they've been around for a long time. The chemicals aren't new. It's just the technologies is evolving to allow them to be used in a greater depth and in different applications than what they've been used for in the last 30 years, which is just for shallow applications in the top 15 feet below surface. So so those chemicals are inert once they're mixed in the ground. So there's environmental problems with all things, really, aren't there? I mean, concrete's not really, it can be environmentally sensitive. You've got to get it from somewhere. You've got to dig it out of the ground to get the raw material. So and it's an alkaline material which you put in the ground. You can change the pH of the water and things like that. So, but I think polymer is probably more more inert really than concrete grout in that respect.
Yeah, it sounds like it's the technique that you just explained with injecting it from the point of where the void is makes a lot of sense, and then filling it up and then creating the stabilization of the soil makes total sense. What's the best way to get a hold of you, David?
So my website, probably this is www.groundriskexpert.com. So that's me. That's that fine one. Ground risk expert. Yeah, does what it says on the box.
Yeah. So cities would hire you too. So cities that want to build something in development, they would hire you.
Yeah. I mean,
awesome.
I work with a company called ECS Limited as well. So they're a national company that we, offices in 85 different offices. So we're people like me are available all around the country.
Yeah.
So, and I work internationally as well. So I mean, you can send me anywhere. As long as you send me a return ticket, that's
right. David's ready to go anywhere, everybody. He just said that. Just FYI. Yeah. Well, thank you for joining me, David. This has been wow. I don't know how to describe the information that I was listening to, but it's so cool to know that there's some expert that understands underground like you do. It's
Yeah.
really, spectacular to see that someone's passionate to you about it and really just understands it. And it's really important because as the climate changes, we're going to really need guys like you that are going to be a solution to underground problems, really. So
yeah, everything's in flux. There's what we could rely upon 10 years ago in terms of where the groundwater is and where sea level is. We're gonna have to get used to it changing. A design for California, would they be used to doing all this, the freeze thaw issues that you have in Chicago? They may have to start worrying about that in LA. I don't know. There's some crazy stuff going on there.
What is happening in California? You're right. So, well, thanks a lot for joining me,
All right.
David. And I'm sure we could talk some more, but we'll save that for another time. Thank you so much.
Right, you got it.
Have a great
Thanks,
day.
Ted.